How's it going, everyone? So today I want to talk to you about a little known technique that I have absolutely loved and crushed them on. It's what I call the TCR, or the tiny child rig. I'm sure you've heard of the Nico rig, which is where you have something like a finesse worm. You have a weight in one end, and then you have the hook in the other, and you pull it, and it dances all around and wiggles. I tried it. Didn't really like it. Why? Because I fish a lot of weeds, a lot of grass, a lot of wood, a lot of structure, a lot of cover, which is all this stuff that a exposed hook will get hung up in. And I don't think I caught any bass on a Nico rig, and I just lost a bunch of them. So you know me. I like super flukes weedless. I like craws weedless. So I was like, okay, well, how can I make a Nico rig weedless? Sure, you can buy weed guards that have, just a little, probably a monofilament weed guard like that. You can buy the wire weed guards that you just set it in there, and it's got a little wire that comes around, and hopefully if one bites it, then you'll be able to hook up. And I was like, there's got to be a better way. So then I ran into the tiny child rig. And the tiny child rig changed my entire perspective on finesse fishing and helped me catch so many bass. Some of y'all know exactly what I'm talking about. What is the tiny child rig? Well, it's essentially a weedless Nico rig. Instead of having the hook exposed, you flip it around and you don't. So for this, I like Z-Man products. Whether it's a hula stick with these tentacles up top, whether it's a big TRD, which stands for the real deal, or a turd, or you can use it in a finesse turd. I'll link all the products I use to make the tiny child rig down below. Why do they call it a tiny child rig? It's so easy to fish, even a tiny child can do it. And what I mean by that is it's so incredibly weedless, you can feel the bite so well, and it's so easy to set the hook. You really don't even have to set the hook a lot of the time. For this application, I use a VMC Finesse Nico hook. And the reason I do that is because they have a little monofilament keeper so your bait doesn't slide down. So once you set it, it's done. And you don't have to adjust it between every cast. So how do we make a tiny child rig? Well, first, we take my favorite, the big turd, and you can shove a nail weight in it. You can shove this, a screw in it. You can use anything to weight it down depending on your budget. First, I used multi-purpose screws. Then I graduated to using lead nail weights that were actually specifically for this purpose. All right, so first you take your turd, right? Whenever you're putting the weight in, you don't want to go into the slightly more narrow side. You want to go into the thicker side. Due to that elasticity, it's really hard to get a nail weight into a new worm because it just bounces right out. It doesn't stick in. So one thing I do whenever I'm setting them up, I'll take my hook and I'll just go in and out of the end of this TRD and make a bunch of holes in it. Try to get them all in the center. That way there's already a hole made and it's torn up a little bit, so that whenever I push that nail weight in, it'll actually be easier to go in and stay in. So you just take it, push it in, it's going to push back against you. And then if you kind of just hold it with 3 fingers so that you have the rest of the worm kind of straight-ish, then just use some force and push it through. You'll hear some crackling sounds of it kind of breaking through that elastic, Elastec is what it's called. Then it'll be in. Then all you have to do is take your hook, go through about to the bend, go out, turn it around, and rehook it. And you want that, whenever you rehook it, you want that hook inside the bait. You don't have to stick it out or anything, because with this being so elastic, it's also very soft, and that means that it's going to be really easy for that hook to just come out on any hook set that you do. There you have it, that's it. But the more I use this, well, the more the weights would back themselves out as the fish shake around with them in their mouths, and that nail weight would fly off to Narnia, never to be heard from again. So what did I do? I said, all right, started super gluing them. Well, that worked a little bit better, but if you've ever worked with super glue, you know that super glue will hold tight, but once it dries, it gets very brittle. So I ran into the same issue. Whenever the fish were shaking their heads with this in their mouths, and that weight flying all over the place, well, it would cause the elastic to stretch, contract, and that would loosen up the super glue very quickly. So then I started thinking about what could I do? How can I make this better? How can I keep my weights from flying away from the bait? So what I did was I got some nanofill fishing line. It's very strong for its diameter. It's almost like a braided fishing line. And what I did was I took it and I put, I don't even know if you can see the end of it, but I would thread the nanofill through the eye of a large gauge sewing needle. And I would take that sewing needle and I would push it in one end. Then I think I had a pair of work gloves or just found a hard surface to kind of help push it through, because if you're pushing it through with your finger, it's going to hurt. But what I did was I took it through whatever way you can find and just push it all the way from one end to the other, so that you have this nanofill line throughout the entire thing. What you can also do is you can tie, then what I did was I took that nanofill and I tied it to the first indentation right behind the point of the nail weight, and then tied the other end to the hook. And then I had this, a tiny child rig where the nanofill is attached to the eye of the hook and then attached to the nail weight, so that that nail weight can't go anywhere. Now, the issue that we'll have is after many fish, the nail weight would start to come through the sides or start to fall out the bottom, something like that. If it's falling out the bottom, all you have to do is remove the turd from the hook, and you can just wrap it around the hook again. And that's kind of hard to do, but if you scrunch up the turd, then that should give you enough slack that you can re-thread it on there, and then you're good to go. If it starts coming out the side, well, then you just got to play around with it. Then maybe move the nail weight up a little bit into the turd, but you're probably nearing the end of that turd's life. But that's no big issue, because I have fished for these things for back-to-back days, catching, I don't know, 20, 30 fish on them before one even starts to get close to wearing out. So you can get a lot of fish on these, and that's the beauty of this Elastec material, is it's so stretchy, it becomes so durable. Not like a regular soft plastic that if I were to try to do that with this, it'd get torn up, and they get torn up very easily. They can get ripped easily, and you only have so many fish that you can catch on them, meaning like, I don't know, 3, maybe 5 if you're super lucky. but the elastic just works so well. Another way that you can thread the nanofill through the turd is this way. Get some nanofill, you're going to tie a Palomar knot. That's what I use with all braid. You take your line, fold it back on itself, just doubling it over itself. Make a point out of that so that you can take it through the hook. Tie an overhand knot. And then the big loop that you have from where it's doubled over on itself, take the hook through that loop. And pull it tight. Then you have a Palomar knot. Since you want the hook to end up on the thin end of the turd, what you'll do is you'll start on the thick end and you'll just thread it on. Try to keep it as straight as you can. And you want that nanofill to go down as close to the center of the turd as you can. It gets kind of hard here when the entire hook is covered, and you'll get it out. What I've found to be easiest is to grab it with my teeth and pull, and since it's so soft that the turd should slip right down the hook. There you go, got it around the bend. Whew, that's salty. Delicious. I'll leave maybe that much room in between the hook and the nanofill because it'll scooch down and give you plenty of room. And then all you have to do, cut the bottom of this. You can leave a little extra room. Cut that, then you'll tie it to the top of your nail weight. Then all you have to do is push the nail weight up into the turd. Really quick and easy. Re-rig it. And then you're good to go. Now what I've done is I've bought multiple colors and I rig these up beforehand because once you have the weight inside the turd, it's not going anywhere. It's not like you can just cut it off and you'll be using the same weight on a different turd. This is one unit. You can't just cut it off and use a different color. Everything from the hook to the turd to the weight, they all go together. So if you want to use a different color, have the colors already made so that you cut it off. Make sure you don't cut your nanofill, that you cut your main line. Another reason why it's called the Tiny Child Rig is, like I said, for the ease of casting. They're very easy to cast. They have a lot of weight in them. So whether you're using a spinning setup or a bait caster, they're very easy to cast, but they're for children, right? So that means they're very snag resistant, not snag proof, but snag resistant. And that's because the hook is embedded in that turd. One tip for you whenever you're getting lures out of trees, especially stuff like worms, stuff that is weedless, is to just pull. Like not snap, not get it close to the top of the tree limb and then pull quickly, just a steady, slow pull on it. You can twitch your rod a little bit, but you don't want that thing swinging around. The only reason that you should twitch your rod with these guys is because they are kind of sticky, so they'll stick to surfaces sometimes a little bit. So you're just twitching just to give it that little nudge. But if you just do a smooth, steady pull, small twitches, then it will work itself around tree limbs, around railings, around whatever you throw it on, and it'll work itself out. Last thing with these, whenever you do set the hook, you don't have to reel down and do a Mongo hook set like you would if you have a jig that has a thick hook. Remember, these hooks are pretty small, and your hook set is dependent on the size of your hook. If you have those 2 double thick hooks like on frogs, you're going to want to set that thing and really cross that fish's eyes. But the smaller the diameter of the hook, the easier it will penetrate that fish's mouth, and that's all you're trying to do. If they're very, very small diameter, then if you set the hook super hard, you can either tear it through the fish's mouth, or you could straighten out your hook and lose the fish. So with these, all I do is a solid, quick hook set. Just, I feel some, grab it, set the hook, and then bringing them in. You don't have to do a super hard hook set, and that's one of the things that makes it great for kids, is that if they haven't gotten their hook set down, this is perfect for them to learn on, and they should get plenty of fish to practice. All right, let's go out on the water, and I'll show you how to fish these things. So we got our TCR here. I like to throw it on a medium action rod. This one's a G Loomis that I was able to get off of a guy for pretty cheap. Been a great rod for this. And then I'm using the SLX DC by Shimano, 12-pound line. That 12-pound line I like because you can use it for a long time without having to retie, you know, every few fish. And with the fluorocarbon 12-pound line, it's still pretty invisible in the water, so the fish aren't likely to see it. I like the medium action rod because it loads up so well, and that's one thing that I didn't understand when I started bass fishing, was that whenever you cast, you really want that rod to load up so that it will throw your bait out really far. Otherwise, you're gonna go try to cast your lure out there, but your rod's too stiff, so it's gonna go right here, and you're gonna get a humongous backlash. So that's what I like to use. So you can see, like, just kind of going around, my rod really flexes with that lure, and it's got a tiny bit of weight to it to make it even easier to cast. So what I do with the tiny child rig, cast it out, feed it some line depending on the depth of the water. We're really shallow right here, so I don't have to give it too much, and then I just give it a few seconds to sink down. Then I just hop it back slowly once I get it far enough away from the target, from the, you know, cover. This is something that I really like to target wood, rocks, and grass with, especially that wood and grass. But once you get it far enough away from that cover to where you don't think something's likely to bite it, then just reel it back in, and just little rod twitches. That's all you have to do. And what it'll do on the bottom, since it's bottom weighted, it'll hop like this, and a lot of times it'll even go up because you're pulling it this way, so it'll go up, and instead of just falling straight down, it'll kind of go like this. It'll go up and then glide a little bit back. So if there's a bass following it, which makes this technique really deadly, is they'll come right behind it. It goes up and they'll kind of move close to it, but then it'll kind of fall back towards them a little bit, and that can really set them off and trigger a reaction bite. Now this water is more muddy than I typically like to use this for. It can still work, but when the water is this muddy, it really limits their engagement zone, their strike zone. So you'd have to really get it right in front of them in order for them to bite. And that's what I do. Just go along, throw it out, let it sink, little twitches, let it sink, twitches, let it sink, twitches, let it sink. Get away from it, reel it up, shoot at the next target, and remember, always targeting the things that are different. So that little gap between the grass. Got away from it a little bit, and you can even, instead of doing the traditional cast, you can hold it with one hand and then let it pendulum out, pitching and flipping. Now it's easier to do if you're closer to it, but you can make some pretty long pitches and flips with this. Now there's a lay down log right there, so I'll let it sink down to it, and then you can just work it down the side of the log. Don't give it too big of twitches so it doesn't hop over the log, and it'll just travel right along that log. I really like this chartreuse and black color combinations for dirtier water where they don't have as great a visibility, and that contrast between the dark and the really bright can really help. Can also go straight black. I like the black and blue. I'll link everything in the description down below. And then for clear water, the deal is really good. It's a green pumpkin and pearl. Also like Drew's Crawl, I like Goby. If the water's pretty stinking clear, Perfect Perch is really good because it really looks natural. But switch it up, because I've had times where it was pretty darn clear water, but they were hammering that black and blue. So you never know. With the clearer water, you can get away with a lot of stuff. Got yourself a leaf. Good job, Coda. There's a tiny child rig. That's how I throw it out. I hope you liked my talk about the tiny child rig. Good old TCR. Again, by far one of my favorite lures. If I can be throwing it, I'm likely throwing it, just because it is so effective and you can get so many fish from big to small. And you just work your way through the small ones to get the big ones to bite, fire up that school, and have at it. If you would, please give this video a like, subscribe if you haven't already subscribed, and if you think this technique will help anyone out, shoot it to them. You can text it to your friends, you can share it with them on any of the social media pages, anything like that. I'm here to help you do better, and I've had many friends ask me to do a video on this technique in particular. I hope you go out. I hope you absolutely wear out the fish. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them in the comment section down below. Take care. Tight lines. We'll catch you later.